Let's get into this. We've got a really fascinating source today. It's packed with insights from an entrepreneur, an investor, someone who's spent, well, decades really building businesses, investing, and thinking deeply about what actually matters, in work, in life.
Yeah, it's quite a rich perspective.
Totally. So our mission here in this deep dive is to sort of pull out the most valuable nuggets from his experience. We're talking everything from like redefining success itself to really practical boots on the ground tips.
Building relationships, spotting opportunities, managing, the flood of information we all deal with.
Right, even how to use AI effectively. And the thing is, this isn't just a business playbook. It feels more like a look at human nature, challenging those assumptions we all kind of carry around.
And figuring out how to build a life that actually feels right for you.
Exactly. So settle in. We're about to dive deep into how one person navigated, the messy, complicated world of entrepreneurship and investing, and what we can maybe learn from his journey.
And what's really striking is how it connects things you might not normally put together. Business strategy, sure, but also personal growth, psychology, it all weaves together.
Yeah, it shows that being well-informed isn't just about mastering one little box, is it? It's about seeing the connections.
It's less like a rigid map.
And more like building your own compass, maybe. And speaking of rigid maps, the source kicks off by challenging some pretty core ideas, particularly this notion that entrepreneurs sometimes build their own prisons.
That's such a sharp point. Yeah, these self-made prisons. And a lot of that comes from the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we adopt. A big one he tackles is that term, lifestyle business.
Oh, yeah. That gets thrown around a lot, usually negatively, right?
Totally. Dismissively, like, oh, it's just a lifestyle business, implying it's small or maybe not ambitious enough, especially in, VC circles.
Where everything's about massive scale, unicorn hunting.
Precisely. Their model needs that billion-dollar potential. But this source really pushes back. It asks, well, what if all businesses should ultimately be lifestyle businesses?
Meaning they should actually improve your life, not destroy it.
Exactly that. The key distinction isn't really the size. You could have a small business that totally traps you. You're just trading hours for dollars, burning out.
Sure.
Or you could build something pretty substantial, multi-million-dollar revenue, maybe 100 employees, but structure it deliberately so it supports the life you want.
Whether that's surfing or family time or just control over your own damn schedule.
Right. So the core idea is don't let these conventional definitions of success or what a real business looks like trap you. A successful business, in this view, supports the life you want. It's about the design.
Not just the scale. Which makes sense because freedom is usually the starting point for entrepreneurs, isn't it?
It really is. That initial spark. But then, ironically, sometimes the paths they take, maybe that traditional VC route, load them up with so much external pressure and complexity
that they end up feeling less free.
Exactly. It's a paradox. You wanted freedom. Now you're answering to a board and facing intense growth targets you didn't necessarily set for yourself.
Like the example of Jason Fried at Basecamp comes up, right? Building deliberately without VC funding.
Yeah, a classic example. He built a big, successful company that specifically avoided VC money to maintain control, to build it on his terms, aligned with his values and desired lifestyle.
He wasn't tracked by someone else's timeline or definition of success.
And that conscious choice, prioritizing control and lifestyle, maybe over just raw hypergrowth, it's a powerful counter-narrative.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you're building this business designed for freedom, you pretty quickly run into the limits of what one person can do alone.
Absolutely.
Which leads right into another core idea from the source. Entrepreneurship fundamentally becomes the art of delegation.
It's a journey, isn't it? You start out, you have to wear every single hat, project manager, sales guy, bookkeeper, tech support, everything.
You're doing it all.
Because you have to. But then you realize pretty fast, okay, I'm actually terrible at bookkeeping, or I hate doing customer support. So you start hiring for your weaknesses.
Right. Get someone who actually enjoys that stuff or is naturally good at it. Stop trying to be Superman.
Exactly. And then it evolves again. You start delegating stuff you are good at. Maybe you're a great salesperson, but it's not the highest leverage use of your specific time anymore.
So you delegate most of it, maybe just step in for the big strategic meetings.
Precisely. The goal is freeing yourself up for the things only you can do, or the things that really move the needle on the whole business direction. Vision, strategy, key relationships.
And the ultimate level of that, the source suggests, is hiring a CEO
Yeah.
to run the whole show.
Yeah. You go from doer to manager to leader, maybe eventually just to owner or visionary.
And then, taking it even further, buying whole companies is framed as the ultimate form of delegation.
Think about it, right? Instead of the incredible grind and stress of starting from absolute zero, finding product market fit, building the team, all that initial chaos.
You acquire something that's already working with a team in place.
Exactly. You're essentially delegating the entire startup phase. You skip straight to owning an operating asset.
And the source talks about Tiny's approach here. The company this entrepreneur founded, describing it as being the nice step-parent for businesses.
It's a great analogy because it contrasts so much with traditional private equity, which, let's be honest, can often feel pretty disruptive or focus purely on financial engineering.
Right. Stripping assets or loading up debt.
Tiny's model, as described, is more about being a supportive long-term home. They often keep the team, respect the culture, provide resources, but let the business continue doing what it does well, respecting the founder's legacy.
So it's less formal, less jargon-filled than typical M&A.
Yeah, much more relationship-based. Less intimidating for founders, perhaps.
So the core idea here is that scaling yourself, scaling your impact, it's this whole spectrum. From hiring your first assistant all the way up to acquiring entire companies. You're sort of abstracting away the operational bits you don't want to handle directly.
Yeah, abstracting away the business parts you're not best suited for or just don't want to do anymore. You build a machine, then decide which levers you actually want to pull.
Okay, now shifting gears a bit from building the business itself to building your world, I guess. The source talks about this unexpected side benefit of being an entrepreneur or investor.
Yeah.
It's an amazing hack for meeting interesting people, building relationships.
That really resonated with me because, when you're younger, school, first jobs, you naturally bump into people all the time.
Right, there's built-in community.
But as you get older, that happens less organically. You have to be much more deliberate about expanding your circle, finding those stimulating people.
And the methods described are, well, they're pretty proactive, like cold emailing someone you admire and offering a serious charity donation for an hour of their time.
The example was what, $25,000 for a meeting?
Yeah. It just shows a real willingness to invest time, money, whatever, to access people and perspectives you wouldn't otherwise.
And other methods too, right? Attending conferences, even when you feel like a nobody just starting out.
Like the story of spending $20K on TED when the business was only doing $1. That takes some guts.
It does. But also, crucially, creating your own connection points, not just waiting for invitations.
Yeah, that build your own stage idea. If nobody asks you to speak, host your own event, like the Interesting People Conference or these structured entrepreneurs lunch clubs.
And the structure seems key there. It's not just random mingling. Using prompts like, what's an energy vampire in your life? Or even assigning seats.
To force deeper conversation. Get past the usual small talk.
Exactly, to engineer serendipity and connection rather than just leaving it to chance. And the payoff isn't just like a bigger Rolodex.
No, the source mentions people from these forum groups becoming super trusted advisors, even executors of wills. These aren't just contacts, they become real friends.
Deep personal connections. So the core nugget is business can actually be this incredibly powerful engine for building a rich, fulfilling personal network. But you have to be intentional about it. Curate who you spend time with. Foster real depth.
And it turns out, these relationships aren't just good for your personal life. They're like a hidden superpower in investing, too. Which brings us to the source's investment philosophy. Fish where the fish are.
Right, which basically means the most profitable spots often aren't the super glamorous, crowded, sexy areas everyone's chasing.
They're quieter, less competitive.
Often, yeah. Like the classic comparison, restaurants, super competitive, visible, often thin margins versus, say, funeral homes. Less competition, less price sensitivity in the moment of need, generally healthier margins.
Okay, find the less obvious pawns.
And that landscape keeps changing. AI, for example, is mentioned as making even some niche supportive now, places that used to be quieter. So you constantly have to look for those less overfished areas.
But here's the really interesting part. The source argues, the biggest edge in investing isn't really crunching numbers or using fancy stock screeners.
No, it's relationships.
That's the core.
That's presented as the absolute core. Financial analysis matters. You have to do the math, but the source puts it at maybe 5-10% of the job.
Wow, that low.
Yeah. The other 90%, maybe 95%, is qualitative. It's understanding the people, assessing the real moat, like what truly protects this business from competition. And crucially, in our team, do you trust them? Do they trust you?
Okay, so how do relationships actually lead to deals? Is it just networking?
It leads to what's called proprietary deal flow. Basically, deals that aren't widely shopped around. When you build a reputation for being fair, for being founder-friendly, for being that nice step-parent we talked about,
Right.
then founders, or founders connected to people, are much more likely to just call you when they're thinking about selling.
So they bypass the whole stressful auction process.
Exactly. They trust you'll be a good home for their business, their baby. It avoids the impersonal, often adversarial, traditional M&A process.
And this explains some of those acquisitions mentioned, like Letterboxd or Dribbble or AeroPress. They weren't found through some banker's list.
Apparently not. Often they came through these serendipitous connections, personal affinities, or just the founders knowing Tiny's reputation and reaching out directly.
It sounds like a strategy built on patience and trust, really.
Very much so. Waiting for those dream businesses with real moats to surface through the network. Also acquiring good, maybe not stellar, but solid businesses. And sometimes, buying distressed assets cheap if the opportunity arises through a relationship and you see a clear path to.
So the big takeaway on investing isn't just buy low, sell network. Your reputation. Those are your most valuable assets. They open doors that spreadsheets alone never will.
Exactly. It really flips the conventional wisdom, putting the human element front and center. It's about the long game of building trust.
Okay, shifting from understanding the market to understanding yourself. This feels like a major theme. The source talks about this long journey of self-awareness, figuring out your actual strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and mentions it took until, 35 or later to really get clarity on that?
Which feels, pretty relatable for a lot of people, I think. It takes time.
And it connects to this idea of accepting that people just have different operating systems, different hardwiring. What energizes one person might completely drain another.
Like the comparison between a deep introvert, maybe like Derek Sivers, versus a natural extrovert.
Right. You can't just force yourself to operate successfully against your fundamental nature long term. You have to understand your own wiring.
Which sounds a bit like that visionary versus integrator concept from the EOS framework.
It's a very similar idea. The source talks about finding profound peace by fully embracing the visionary role ideas, strategy, culture, deals, and making sure there was a strong integrator handling the day-to-day execution.
Visionary should have no deliverables.
That's the quote, yeah. Their job is to think, connect, set direction, not get bogged down in managing tasks.
And then there's this even deeper layer of self-discovery. You mentioned the ADHD diagnosis at age 40.
Yeah, that was shared quite openly. Realizing that these lifelong feelings, maybe restlessness, getting easily overwhelmed, struggling with certain kinds of focus, weren't just personality quirks or anxiety.
But had a biological basis.
Exactly. And the analogy used is really powerful. Treating the ADHD with medication is like taking an antihistamine for allergies addressing the underlying biology.
Okay.
Whereas building a whole complex business as a way to cope with those underlying symptoms, that's like running a marathon to try and clear your stuffy nose.
Wow. Okay. You might achieve something impressive on the surface.
Yeah, you built a business. But it's an incredibly inefficient, maybe even painful way to deal with the root cause. It highlights the importance of understanding and addressing mental health, neurodiversity directly.
Don't just try to power through or build elaborate coping mechanisms without understanding the why.
Right. And all this self-understanding connects back to the stories we tell ourselves about our lives. The source talks about these self-made narratives. Sometimes they're defensive, sometimes limiting.
And the need to investigate them. Maybe rewrite them.
Yeah, drawing on ideas from therapists like Paul Key. Shifting from this bad thing happened to me, which can feel passive, like being a victim, to, okay, this happened, I learned X, Y, and Z from it, and now I am this person because of it. Taking agency back.
Exactly. Owning your story, including the tough parts, but framing it around growth and learning. And recognizing life seems to have these pivot points anyway, maybe every 7 or 8 years, where reassessment makes sense.
It all seems to lead towards needing the courage to be disliked, as the book title goes.
Being willing to live authentically, according to your own understanding and values, not being trapped by what you said 5 years ago or what you think others expect of you. So the core nugget here is really deep. Understanding your own mind, your biology, your narratives, that's just as vital for success and, frankly, happiness as understanding external things like markets or technology.
Absolutely. You can't optimize the external if the internal is working against you.
Okay, let's bring this down to some very practical ground now. Managing information, finding opportunities today. Information overload is, well, it's real.
It's intense. Our brains just weren't built for this constant fire hose of global crises and notifications, right?
Definitely not.
So the source suggests something pretty radical. Just blind yourself. Intentionally cut off the constant crisis feeds.
Really? Just ignore the news.
The argument is trust that genuinely essential information will find its way to you anyway, probably through your curated network, or when you actively seek it for a specific reason. Don't just passively consume the stream of negativity and distraction.
That's bold. But I can see the appeal for protecting focus and the fundamental tactic for managing everything else coming at you.
Get it out of your head. Simple as that.
Into a trusted system.
Exactly. David Allen's Getting Things Done GTD is highlighted for a reason. That core idea. Capture everything that has your attention into an inbox and process it reliably into actions, projects, reference, whatever.
It frees up your brain from trying to remember everything.
So your brain can actually think, be creative, solve problems, instead of just being a leaky RAM stick.
And now, of course, there's AI entering the picture as a productivity tool.
Yeah, it's becoming that bicycle for the mind Steve Jobs talked about, automating stuff that used to be manual and inefficient.
Like what kind of examples?
Things like AI routing emails automatically based on content, analyzing deal documents much faster. The source mentioned using it for personal tax analysis and finding like $100K in savings one year.
Wow.
AI critiquing board reports before you send them, handling initial customer support tickets, doing first pass legal document review. It saves time, saves money, frees up humans for higher value work.
It's about efficiency and leverage.
Yeah, definitely. And for investors, it's also something to think about when evaluating a business. How vulnerable is this industry to AI disruption? Or how could AI enhance it?
Okay, and for people listening who are maybe aspiring entrepreneurs thinking about starting something, there's some practical advice there too.
Yeah, focus on building a launch pad first. Get your personal income to a stable place, maybe around $100 a year, before taking huge risks.
Agencies are mentioned as one potential path for that.
They can be relatively quick to generate cash flow, yeah. So they have their own headaches, obviously. But the core principle is find a profitable niche.
Back to fish where the fish are.
Exactly. And ideally sell to customers who aren't super price sensitive, high value B2B services, maybe to well-funded startups, or industries with good margins themselves.
Rather than trying to sell like $10 t-shirts to consumers.
Right. Passion projects are great, but building a business purely on passion in a super crowded, low margin space, that's often the absolute hardest route to actually making a living.
And another really key financial principle mentioned, especially for smaller businesses, profit first.
Oh yeah, this is powerful. It flips the standard accounting equation. Instead of revenue minus expenses equals profit.
It's revenue minus profit equals expenses.
Exactly. You decide on a profit percentage first, take that money out, put it aside, and then you force yourself to run the business on what's left for expenses.
Psychologically strong.
Yeah.
And using separate bank accounts helps.
Definitely. Having it accounts for income, profit, owner's pay, tax, operating expenses. It makes the money tangible and enforces the discipline. You feel the profit. It's not just a number on a spreadsheet that vanishes.
Know your numbers. Simple but crucial.
Absolutely non-negotiable. You need that clarity.
And then there's a list of recommended books and frameworks beyond GTD and Profit First. E-Myth.
Yeah, classic. About working on your business, building systems, not just being trapped working in it.
How to get everything you can out of what you've got.
Jay Abraham's book. Great for finding hidden assets, overlooked opportunities within your existing business.
The Laws of Human Nature, Psychology of Human Misjudgment.
Understanding people. Crucial for negotiation, marketing, management, everything. Robert Greene, Charlie Munger. Essential reading.
And the Tao of Charlie Munger.
This broad, multidisciplinary wisdom. Thinking models, inversion, learning how to think better, basically.
It feels like the thread connecting all these practical hacks is use systems. Whether it's GTD, Profit First, AI leverage systems to free up your mind for the importance.
Yeah, automate or systematize the routine so you can focus on strategy, relationships, opportunities, the high leverage activities.
Okay, on balancing it all, building something significant, but also having a life and finding meaning beyond just money.
Yeah, it pushes back on the idea that you have to sacrifice your life to build a big business. It argues you can do both, potentially working effectively, maybe just 4 focused hours a day.
Oh.
By being ruthless about eliminating theater, unnecessary meetings, overly complex processes, internal politics, bloated teams, just cutting out the stuff that doesn't add real value.
And working with great people simplifies things too.
Massively. If you trust the people you work with, assessed qualitatively, back to that relationship point, you need less bureaucracy, less complex contracts, less checking up. Things just flow better.
But eventually, there's that realization. Even if you achieve huge financial success, the money itself doesn't automatically deliver deep meaning or happiness.
Right. That seems to be a common point in the journey for many successful people, which in this case led towards finding real meaning in philanthropy, giving wealth away.
Joining the Giving Pledge, philanthropy became a new focus.
Yeah, a new lane or zone to operate in. And the strategy described is interesting, like a barbell, making big bets on potential future breakthroughs, like Alzheimer's research.
High risk, high reward, long term.
Exactly. And balancing that with funding very tangible, immediate impact now, like surgeries to cure trachoma blindness. You can see the direct result today.
A barbell approach to giving back.
Oh,
But interestingly, even with that focus on philanthropy, the passion for building businesses, it didn't go away.
no, that desire to build the thing, that complex machine of systems and people, it seems to remain.
So how is that sustained? Where does the ongoing meaning come from?
It seems to come from staying in your lane, your specific zone of genius, focusing on the parts you're uniquely good at and genuinely enjoy. For this entrepreneur, that was relationships, storytelling, deal-making, big picture strategy.
And not getting bogged down in the weeds of managing lots of internal people issues, which wasn't his core strength or passion.
Exactly. Aligning your work with your natural inclinations and also building that public presence, Twitter, the book, podcasts, that creates its own kind of moat.
How so?
Brand and network effects. It brings opportunities to you, inbound deal flow, interesting people reaching out. It reduces the need to constantly be out there pitching and chasing. And easily replicate that kind of reputation and reach.
It all comes back around, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Know yourself, build relationships, structure things intentionally.
Yeah. The final thought seems to be that lasting meaning really comes when your external achievements align with your internal values and your natural way of operating. Often found in service or creating, long after money stops being the main driver.
So you've just gotten a pretty deep dive into a remarkably candid and often counter-conventional perspective on building businesses, investing, and really designing a life that actually works for you. We've touched on those self-made prisons of conventional thinking, the real art of delegation, using business itself as an engine for relationships, finding those hidden investment opportunities that aren't just on spreadsheets.
Wrestling with your own psychology, your biology even, and ultimately discovering what brings meaning beyond just the bottom line.
And what's so fascinating, I think, is that consistent thread running through it all. How much of building external success in business or investing actually seems to come down to understanding yourself and connecting genuinely with other people.
It really does seem to be the foundation.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe something for areas often aren't the most obvious or glamorous ones. And if the biggest opportunities really come from your network and reputation, not just technical skill, how might that change the way you approach your own work, your own investments, or even just how you spend your time starting today? Something to think about as you navigate your own path forward.